right. Focused on the state of Florida, to say the least. Tom Pelisero joining us here in a very timely fashion. Oh, this is a look of a man who did breaking news on television.
All business.
Normally, Tom's just showing up. He's in a hoodie. He's just chilling out at home for us.
Maybe a hat.
Yeah, sometimes in a Waffle House.
Tom, did you just do a hit on NFL Network, Tom?
This is not a Halloween costume right here, Rich. Yes, we did have some breaking news. I guess if there were a costume, I would be here as NFL Network's Tom Pelisero, not as Rich Eisen Show. Tom Pelisero. And what's up to my boys in the studio there?
What's up, baby?
All right, Tom. First,
Aquaman or whatever it is. Is that George Clinton over in the corner?
No,
George
Clinton. That wasn't a bad choice. That's not a bad pull.
Cam Newton.
He's Cam.
Oh, Cam. Yeah, okay,
Kelsey.
good. That's
Okay.
very solid.
All right.
Good Expos jersey, too.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay. So, Tommy P, let's just jump into it here, Tom. Why did there need to be a parting of the ways with the general manager after the Thursday night loss for the now 2-7 Dolphins, Tom?
From a timing perspective, Rich, it makes sense that the Dolphins would want to make this move prior to the trade deadline, which is just 4 days away, allowing somebody with perhaps a little bit different perspective to take eyes to the roster. In other words, Chris Greer, who's a very nice man and had been there for a decade. They had in that time been a 500 team that had been to the playoffs 3 times and never won a postseason game. When he was getting calls in recent weeks, by and large, his answer to teams was, no, we're trying to win. We're trying to turn this thing around. And if you're somebody who is trying to stay in your job, you would think that might not, change in the coming days here, because you're still at 2-7, technically, mathematically alive, by turning this over now to Champ Kelly, who, in a very strange statistical twist, is becoming an interim general manager for the second time in 3 years, both on Halloween. You're going to potentially take a fresh set of eyes to the decisions that lie ahead. There have been calls on a bunch of the Dolphins veteran players. They had gotten calls on Jalen Waddle, on Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Matthew Judon, Rasul Douglas. And in most cases, the answer they were getting from Greer was essentially like, we're not really in that mode right now. Let's see. And these are not going to be Champ Kelly making these decisions unilaterally. Certainly, you're going to need buy-in from ownership and other stakeholders, because you are the interim GM here. But let's see. I can guarantee there's going to be a new flood of calls on some of those very same names and others. Let's see how the Dolphins try to navigate this here, knowing that while they are mathematically alive, they've also got a lot of decisions to try to set themselves up in 2026 and beyond. Let's see how aggressive exactly they're going to be between now and 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday.
Well, the follow-up question I have is, wouldn't Chris Greer then change his tune about, we're not trading anybody, if ownership said you lose your job unless you take a different approach to the trade deadline? Or was this, best to your knowledge, ownership saying full vote of no confidence? We just don't want you to be the one to make these trades. We're done now. Like, which one was it, do you think, Tom?
Well, Stephen Ross has a great deal of affection for Chris Greer, who's been in the organization for like a quarter century.
Right.
It was framed by the club as a mutual parting of ways. They had a conversation. And listen, Chris Greer, I don't know that it would be entirely fair to Chris to put him in a position, much like you remember Reggie McKenzie was in his final year with the Raiders, where John Gruden had effectively taken over all things in football operations. He essentially made Reggie McKenzie trade away all of his best draft picks, including Khalil Mack, and then fired him that December. This allows Chris to walk away from it at this point, to allow people who might be around. And listen, Champ just got there. He was hired this year as a senior personnel executive. I saw him briefly in training camp. He may not be a part of the long-term vision either, but at least it allows there to be sort of a reset here. It certainly is going to generate more phone calls as this thing rolls forward. And the next question then becomes, is Mike McDaniel going to be a part of the club into 2026? And here's what I would say on that front, Rich. Mike is another guy that Stephen Ross believes in. He extended his contract in the prior offseason in 2024. He has shown that he can be an effective NFL coach. He has been to the playoffs. He has won games. He came into this season with a winning record. Obviously, this season has not gone his way. but take into account the broader picture of where we are right now with the Dolphins. They are locked in with Tua Tagovailoa for over $50 million fully guaranteed in 2026. And I brought this up on this show a month or so ago when questions were first really arising about Mike McDaniel's status. If you were to fire Mike McDaniel, which again, is it possible that happens? Sure. We got to see how, the next couple of games go. They're in Spain in a couple of weeks, and then obviously they've got a bye and then a half dozen games after that. Let's see how the rest of the season finishes. But I would just say Tua at over $50 million fully guaranteed might not be an extremely attractive option to head coaching candidates who are coming in, especially given his medical history and the up and down state of his play through the course of 2025 here. There is certainly a scenario, and again, we will see exactly how this goes, but there is certainly a scenario in my mind where you take a vision to what's going on with the bigger football operation here, bring in a person or multiple people to try to get things right, keep Mike McDaniel for one more run with Tua, who is a quarterback who Mike got the job in part because he was the one coaching candidate back in 2022 who said, I can win with this guy. Give him one more shot with a lot of different moves in terms of personnel, with a new GM or maybe a head of football operations calling the shots here. And then you make the decisions at the end of 2026. By and large, I'm not a fan of jagged transitions. I'm a believer that if you get people who are on the same timeline and reboot the whole thing at once, that has advantages. But in a case like this, where you're tied for that much money to a quarterback that the coach has shown he can get the most out of, at least he has over the first few years that Mike and Tua were together, don't discount the possibility here of Mike McDaniel still getting another crack at this in 2026.
Well, that's interesting because, again, so the choices would be, let's hire a new general manager, and you tell the new GM, you have to keep the coach, and obviously you're keeping the quarterback because that's the, we're not dead capping to the tune of some insane number, and you have to wonder what general manager you'd want would take that job, or you tell a general manager, you hire whichever coach you want, but you got to tell the coach that Tua is your quarterback for at least a year, and you're implying basically what coach would want to do something like that based on what we're seeing from Tua this year. Am I missing either of the doors here for them to go through?
Quite possibly would be a deterrent to a new head coach to be told, essentially, I mean, yes, you could eat that cash and have all the cap accelerate, but that's not an ideal situation. Mm-hmm. And while I would never say any player is untradeable, I would say that Tua's contract is virtually untradeable. So barring them just cutting him, which, we saw Russell Wilson, they ate a bunch of money, they took the cap hits and they dealt with it. Barring that type of scenario, Tua is going to be the Dolphins quarterback in 2026, as long as his health permits that. A new head coach coming into that, you're talking about not a lost season, but certainly a season where you're not going to be able to affect the deep type of changes you might think that you need to make in the organization. I would say this too, and again, Chris Greer is a very nice man who I've gotten to know over the years, has always, treated people around him well. But when other general managers within the league looked at what is holding back the Dolphins, one thing they always said was, it seemed like you had this collection of talent versus building a team. It was hard at times to tell what was the vision, what was the roster building plan that they felt like were going to allow the Dolphins to get into the playoffs and win a playoff game for the first time in however 20 years or so it's been for them. Even this offseason, think back to the way that Miami navigated this. They had made a decision shortly after the season last year to trade Jalen Ramsey, but they really didn't ramp that up until April. You end up not trading Jalen Ramsey until the week of the 4th of July. You do that while also trading away your tight end. You acquire a guy in Minkah Fitzpatrick who's available from Pittsburgh, in part because the tape just wasn't the same on Minkah for a couple of years. Then you acquire a Darren Waller who'd been out of football, looked great, obviously, for a few games. Then he gets hurt. In camp, everybody knew they were short on corners after trading Jalen Ramsey. You're signing Jack Jones, you're signing Roswell Douglas, and you're rolling them out there to play games. Those were all some of the factors that when people evaluated the Dolphins, it just didn't entirely make sense the way that they were approaching things. Now, that's not to say that the failures of this season are all on Chris Greer. Last night, I don't think, especially in the first half, that I sat back and said, boy, this team is at such a talent deficit, they can't hang with the Ravens. Baltimore went right down the field on the first couple of drives and scored touchdowns, but the defense rose up after that. You saw that pass rush get after it a little bit. You saw Rasul Douglas play really well in that game. Offensively, Jalen Waddle has a heck of a night, but everything else was just disjointed. 4 days before that, they'd gone into Atlanta.
Yeah, they look great.
And you said, oh, this is the team. This is the offense that we were used to seeing. Tua played really well. And then last night, it's a false start on 4th and 1. And it's a 4th and 2 play where you got Devon Achane running a route against an all-pro safety in Kyle Hamilton. And I know that they liked that matchup in terms of Achane being able to – they liked the look that they were getting. But, you know, if you were – and Mike's a lot smarter than I am with scheme, but, you know, if you're drawing this up, I don't know that I want Devon Achane running a route like a slot receiver against Kyle Hamilton with the game on the line. And then it seems like he loses the ball in the lights, which happened a few times last night. They miss a field goal. There were all these individual mistakes in the game, and that's kind of been the story of the Dolphins season. So there's a lot of different ways, Rich, that this thing can still go. And there's a lot of ways it can go in terms of Mike McDaniel. There's really not that many ways it can go with Tua. You're paying him either to be your quarterback or you're paying him to not be your quarterback. But you've got the opportunity starting in these next 4 days to potentially be aggressive. Jalen Waddle, it would surprise me if they trade him just because look at how important he is to this team, and you've got him locked in, cost controlled, at least in the short term here. But all the edge rushers, all the other guys you can get value from, the fact you might have a high draft pick in 2026, which also bears mentioning, Rich, right now does not look like the deepest class for franchise quarterbacks. So maybe not drafting your franchise quarterback in 2026 might actually be advantageous. Load up on picks, maximize what you're gaining in terms of draft capital, and maybe that opportunity is there in 2027.
Yeah, we talked about that with Daniel Jeremiah on yesterday's show, where he says he does not know who the first overall pick of the 2026 draft is at this point. Tom Pelisero here on the program. Let's spend a couple minutes on the Jaguars news. What happened with Travis Hunter?
He got injured in practice yesterday, and it doesn't sound great. Liam Cohen not making any guarantees that he'll even return this season. That has all the markings of one of those injuries that is likely to keep him out for an extended period. So, you know, again, this has been a bumpy rookie season. You saw flashes of what they believe Travis Hunter can do. They were set to ramp him up, especially at wide receiver. Now, all of a sudden, you take him off the team, and you have to wonder, for the Jaguars, you know, the upside of trading up and getting that guy at number 2 is, hey, we think we got a stud at wide receiver who's also going to become a stud at corner. Well, now you've got a need at both those positions right before the trade deadline. James Gladstone is a guy who loves the idea of making trades, has swung a couple already. I could see their needs and their aggressiveness potentially ramping up here in the coming days, but it does not sound like, as much as, you know, he has to miss at least 4 games. I don't get the sense, and again, we'll get the full readout probably today. I don't get the sense we're going to see Travis Hunter on the field again anytime soon, which is, you know, just a kind of an emotional blow as much as anything for a Jaguars team that was really looking forward to continuing to see that guy break out.
Yeah, bummer. I mean, we just saw him, on NFL Network calling a game with Kurt, 100-yard game, first of his career, touchdown, first of his career. Brian Thomas expected to come back, right? Is that what we're expected to see? Because Liam Cohen said he looked great in practice this week, if not the best he's seen him this year. That's
what they're hoping.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Any idea? Was Travis on offense or defense when this happened? I'm serious,
Great.
man. And you know, people are going to be wondering, like, what was he doing at the time where he got hurt? Tom?
It's a great detail. I will effort the answer to that, but it was non-contact. I mean, that's
right.
The thing. So regardless of what position he was playing, when you're talking about a non-contact injury, that would point you toward, you know, again, I'm not speculating on this, but usually that would point you toward an ACL or a meniscus injury. Either one of those would be of the longer term type of variety. We'll see exactly what it ends up being here. But back to Brian Thomas for a second here, too. You know, he's been dealing with that shoulder. That was an issue going all the way back to college. It was one of the reasons that, some teams had downgraded him a little bit on their boards. I can't tell you for certain if it's an extension of the exact same injury, but certainly him having a shoulder injury is not anything that's surprising. But to the extent that people thought, that they were going to trade Brian Thomas, I have been told that there are teams that have called. It would take so much to trade Brian Thomas. There's very few players in the entire NFL that don't have a price tag. but we're talking about first-round pick and more for them to think about moving Brian Thomas. You're not going to sell low on a player who was an absolute stud as a rookie last year. I'm not anticipating, especially now with the Travis Hunter news, I'm definitely not anticipating that we're going to see Brian Thomas Jr. moving anywhere by Tuesday.
All right, so the Jets are on a bye. The Browns are on a bye. That's a 1-7 team, a 2-6 team. You have the Raiders coming off of a bye at 2-5. Let me just get this down pat. They are the ones who are taking on Jacksonville at home. I'm mentioning some other teams here. You've got the Cardinals coming off of a bye at the Cowboys on a Monday night. They're 2-5. The Giants are 2-6, taking on the San Francisco 49ers. Saints already at 1-7, and we are seeing them this weekend just up the road against the Rams. The reason why I bring this up is these are the teams that we're looking at to see they're just one loss away from selling the heck out of the trade deadline, or what? Give me some games and teams to look forward to seeing their result and how it plays in the trade deadline before I let you go, Tom.
As much as one game should never swing the thinking, we both know, Rich, that
right.
The recency bias coming off of that, especially if you're one of those teams either in the middle of the pack or at the bottom of the pack, can potentially tip some things. In terms of the teams you mentioned, the Raiders at this point are still, when teams have called them on the likes of Jacoby Myers, the prices are still really high. Do they soften that to try to move players who are probably not part of the future over the next 4 days? Does whatever happens on Sunday influence it? I would certainly think it potentially influences it. But Pete Carroll is also of the mind that they're trying to get this thing going right now. If they weren't, they wouldn't have signed 30-odd-year-old Tyler Lockett to come in and play with his buddy Geno Smith. But certainly teams are monitoring some of those. I don't anticipate Max Crosby is going anywhere. They called him in, sat him down when there were some rumors last week on the internet and told him, like, hey, we're not trading you. We're not listening. We're not shopping you. We're not doing it. Max doesn't want to go anywhere. He wants to be in Vegas, just signed an extension. So I'm not anticipating anything happens with him. For New Orleans, that's another team that's in that mix. Mickey Loomis is always, and I'll put this kindly, a little on the difficult side to deal with. He doesn't want to get trade calls. He doesn't want to sell off his best players. He's been known to hang up the phone on people if he's not thrilled about the names that they're bringing up. I don't see Chris Olave going anywhere. The price on Rashid Shaheed is really high right now, but that I would say is a name to keep in mind. And Brandon Cooks, they would be willing to trade, an older player. There's just not a ton of action right now on Brandon Cooks. They've gotten calls on Alante Taylor as well. But again, price is really high. That's the common thread, Rich, that you're going to hear with a lot of the guys that are available, even the players that Tennessee has available. If you're talking about really good players, the prices on a lot of these guys right now are day two picks. It's a third rounder for a lot of the receivers' names that you're hearing thrown about, where the teams that are looking to make those trades don't really want to part with more than a fourth or a fifth. And so do some of those things, do the Titans soften their price on a Calvin Ridley and potentially see him moving here? The Giants, I have not gotten the sense are in sell mode. I know my colleague Mike Garafolo reported they've gotten calls on Kayvon Thibodeau. They have not wanted to trade him. He would be the logical trade piece if you were going to deal anybody. So I'm not really bracing for anything major of substance there. And then you got a team like the Jets that's on a bye right now. They actually do have a bunch of players that would make sense, but they're not going to take pennies on the dollar. The name that I would continue to keep an eye on would be Quinnen Williams, their defensive tackle. And that's not because they're actively trying to trade Quinnen Williams. It's more so because, we can talk about the Breece Halls of the world, but if you're getting offered a fourth-round pick for Breece Hall, which clears virtually no money off your books and he's your best player on offense, why would you look to just offload that guy? He might still be there. You might be able to get an extension done with him. Quinnen Williams is a guy who's still young, especially at a position where you can play for a long time, but you would be getting potential value here. The price on Quinnen Williams would be, I would anticipate, a first-round pick and more. You actually might have offers in that range for Quinnen Williams. And if you're looking to accelerate your rebuild, making those types of big, bold decisions is one way that you can do it. So I would keep an eye on the Jets with some of those big names. Jermaine Johnson to a certain degree as well. I just don't believe you're going to get the same value, not a first-round pick and more for him. So keep an eye on that. They're not actively shopping Quinnen Williams. It would not shock me if at minimum they have the type of offers put in front of them sometime in the next 4 days that give them something to think about prior to Tuesday.
Tom, thanks for all the information. And also, listen, you and I go way back now, Tom, so I'm not going to take it personally that you've confirmed you would never show up for this show dressed as nicely as you do today because you're coming off of a hit for NFL Network. I won't take that personally. Okay.
You know, I thought we were all dressing down. I don't see you in a shirt and tie, Rich.
No.
TJ technically is wearing a tie today. It's the first tie I've ever seen on this show.
Well,
and so I thought we were in a tie optional world.
You're right. My bad. And by the way, I'm just to talk about how professional I am. I have conducted this entire interview without batting an eye, despite TJ Jefferson. I looked over. He's not wearing pants, and he's got boots on. You know, I mean, this is just a jarring sight. To say the least, Tom. So I'm at least sharing this with you because I just need to share it with somebody. My goodness gracious.
He's really evolving over there. Now the Expos jersey is very prominent. He's like a formal Gary Carter right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Pelisero. Well done. Good pull. That's NFL Network's Tom Pelisero. I'll see you on Sunday for NFL Game Day Morning. That's Tom right here.
Live in Detroit.
There you go. Very good. He'll be against Detroit and the Lions and the Vikings. Very good. That's Tommy P right here. So, hey, you made it all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Check us out every single day streaming live on Disney Plus and the ESPN app 12 to 3 Eastern.